So my name is Anna Zerkle. I'm a student at the Community College of Denver, and this summer I worked with my mentor, Marian Davenport, and I had a lot of help from Sophie Elliott as well. And we studied how temperature and precipitation affect mountain pine beetles, specifically in the Pike San Isabel National Forest. So some motivation and background. The mountain pine beetle is a native insect to the Rocky Mountains, and they're causing kind of widespread tree mortality. And how they do that is they burrow into the phloem layer of pine trees, which is like the live tissue, and they cut off their supply to water and nutrients, which ends up killing the tree. And then they lay their eggs in there, and the eggs develop into larvae and then pupa and then adults. And then after they're adults, they will emerge from the tree and repeat the process. So we want to know how temperature and precipitation affect mountain pine beetle population and infestation rates, because like I said, they're native. So in a normal population, they aren't really damaging to forests. They're just part of the natural life cycle of the trees and just every species in the forest. But because of factors like temperature and precipitation related to climate change, their populations are growing higher and higher and higher, which is killing more trees than our forests can really handle, which is affecting the timber industry and recreation activities in the areas where this is happening. There's a lot of camping and hiking in the Pike San Isabel, and it's affecting the economy there. And learning stuff like this, asking questions like this, it helps us time management activities to minimize future years and try and mitigate the negative effects that's happening. So our methods, we did a climate data analysis. We looked at climate data from the past 43 years. So starting in 1981 from the NOAA website. And then we also had these things called hygrometers, which were constantly measuring temperature and humidity at each of our emergence cages, which I'll talk about emergence cages in a bit. And then we looked at that data and we kind of compared it to the other data we got from our emergence cages and other methods I'll talk about. And we looked for any correlations to see, like, okay, are these beetles emerging earlier where it's hotter? Oh my gosh. Sorry. And these are a picture of what the hygrometers looked like. And then our other methods, so we had these emergence cages, like I said, which were about a 1 foot by 2 foot like mesh cage, which we would kind of put on the north and south side of the tree around DBH height, it's about 4.5 feet up. And what they would do is they would catch when the beetles were emerging. So there was like a little test tube at the bottom, and then when the beetles would emerge, they would be caught in the test tube. So we would know about what date and time of the month they were emerging. And this, just allows us to monitor exactly when they're coming out so we can compare it to climate data. And we would find newly infested trees to put these on, so we knew if they were affected and that we would get mountain pine beetles out of them. And we had 3 of those sites, which I've kind of highlighted. It's Pain Gulch, Redskin Mountain, and Manitou Experimental Forest. And then another thing we did is we did some offspring sampling, which we did 50 trees over 5 different sites, and you cut a 6 by 6 inch piece into the bark of the tree to get to that phloem layer where they're developing. And we would tally up exactly how many of each pupa, larva, adults that we saw. And this gives us some insight into how they're developing and their survival rate. So how many of them are alive in there? What kind of survival rates do they have? Okay, so this was our data from 2 different locations in the Pike National Forest, Bailey, Colorado, which is on the north side, and then Lake George, which is on the second side. And I compared data from 1981 to 2010 to data from 2006 to 2020, just to lay a precedent of like, okay, are temperatures increasing? How much are they increasing? Is precipitation decreasing? How much is it decreasing? So we took a monthly average, and then we also took the total average, which I'll zoom in a little bit because that's really what's important. And as you can see, so the darker colors represent more recent years, and then the lighter colors represent less recent years. And with temperature, it has increased, and with precipitation, it has decreased. So there was an increase in both monthly average and total average temperatures in both locations. So how this affects the mountain pine beetle is it makes their development speed faster. So they're developing faster, they're turning into adults faster, they're emerging faster, they're laying eggs faster, which makes their population grow. And then it also makes it so there's less severe winters, which means more of the offspring survives the winter. So those two factors combined makes the population grow. And then with precipitation, we also saw a decrease in monthly average and total average. And the worsening drought conditions really affect the tree. So temperature really affects the beetle, and the precipitation really affects the tree, and it makes the trees weaker. So like I kind of said earlier, the mountain pine beetle prevents the trees from retaining and transporting water and nutrients. So if that's happening and there's a drought, it's kind of like this perfect combination for the trees to be really susceptible to infestations and for the infestations to be more successful overall. So these are some of our results from our emergence cages. The very first one we collected was from our Peen Gulch site on July 1st, 2024, from the south side of tree number 6. But the majority of our emergences came from Redskin Mountain. So we collected a total of around 53, and 27 of those came from Redskin. So a large population came from Redskin. And then with our offspring sampling, these were the numbers that we tallied after 50 trees. And the highest number was the larva. There was 354 of those. And then adults were the second, which is 252. And pupa was the third, which 225. So just to remind you earlier, the life cycle goes larva, pupa, adults. So the expected time of emergence in the Southern Rocky Mountains, the kind of historical average, is between July to August. So the fact that we saw ours July 1st is indicating that they are coming sooner than historically they have, which is kind of what our hypothesis was, because temperatures are increasing, that it makes sense that we're going to see an emergence sooner than, is expected. And then with our offspring sampling, what these numbers tell us, so there's a large number of larvae, a pretty high number of adults, and a little bit less of pupa. So that means that a significant portion of the population is in development. And it also tells us it's heavily infested and there's a very high survival rate. It also tells us that we can expect an emergence soon. Because there was so many adults, we kind of knew, like, okay, in the next couple weeks, we'll really look for an emergence. And that picture's a pupa, just a little example. And I think they're adorable. Yeah. Anyway, so this is our hygrometer results and a little discussion about it. So what this graph is showing you is the constant temperature starting in June 28th and ending July 18th. The high numbers are during the day, and the minimums are at night. So if you look in the bottom right, you can see the averages of them. Our highest was Redskin Mountain at 62.9, and then in the middle is Payne Gulch at 62.2, and then Manitou Experimental Forest was the coldest at 58.4, which does make sense with the elevation. Manitou Experimental Forest had the highest elevation, so it makes sense it had the lowest temperature. And it also makes sense that Redskin, we saw the most amount of beetles emerging, 27 out of 53, and it's also the hottest. We anticipated Payne Gulch to have a pretty high temperature, if not the highest, because we saw it emerge there first, but that wasn't the case. It wasn't the hottest. So I would recommend, if I could do more work in this experiment, I would find out why that happened. If it was an anomaly or if there's some kind of, factor that led to Payne Gulch being our first emergence when it wasn't the hottest place. So in summary, as temperature increases, so does beetle development and offspring survival. As precipitation decreases, pine trees become weaker, which increases the amount of mountain pine beetle infestations. And Redskin Mountain had the highest average temperature, the lowest elevation, and the greatest numbers of beetle emerging, as well as a growing population. Just a special shout out to some people who helped me out a lot with this. And then there's a QR code you can scan if you want to see some more information. It has my abstract, my references, and some photos if you want to see.
Hey, there's time for maybe one quick question.
Yeah.
So water and temperature, you've shown those are important. Are other things that might seeing lately, like wildfire smoke or other pollutants in and around the Denver area? I know that's not part of your study, but what do you, just your opinion, what might you think that would have on it?
I know there is a connection with the way the mountain pine beetle is killing these trees. It makes it so wildfires are worse because there's more dead trees and more fuel for these fires. So they are connected in a way, in that way anyway. But I'm not sure if it affects their infestation per se. Yeah. Am I done? Yes.
Yeah, the temperature bar charts, maybe I didn't read it correctly. It appeared like the last decades have been actually lower temperatures than.
I can look at this. How do I go back? Okay, so with the temperature, that's the one on the right. The darker colors are more recent years, and the lighter colors are later years. So the lighter color is 1981 to 2010, and the darker color is 2006 to 2020. So the overall average, it was higher in 2006 to 2020.
Okay, thank you very much.